Other questions? Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you had any comments on the so-called spiritual bypass. If this is a notion where you somehow get to a spiritually advanced place where subjectively you don't feel like you're suffering anymore, but you may have unresolved issues, traumas that are still causing certain behavioral patterns that may cause a lot of suffering to those around you, or seem like they should cause suffering to you, but the person says they don't. So have you run into that, and do you have any comments on
I
it?
certainly am familiar with that. I also think of it as flight to the light. A person basically uses spiritual practice as a psychological defense. Now, let's be honest, we will use anything as a psychological defense. Anything that's available. And spiritual practice is another thing that a person can use. If, for instance, you do leaving pattern and being around other people makes you nervous, you might feel quite comfortable going to a monastery for 20 years and living in your tiny solitary cell where nobody interrupts you and nothing new happens, and sitting on your cushion and, dropping into deep states of consciousness. I have known people who came out of monasteries, known of people, I knew their girlfriends. I would hear from the women, they were dating this guy who had literally been in a monastery in Thailand, Cambodia, India, someplace, and, had dropped into some incredibly deep spiritual places, decided he was good to go, came back to the United States, met this woman, and, God help us, had sex. And it blew his inner state. Because he was, because his inner state was predicated on not being disturbed. And, falling in love with there's nothing that will kick up your infantile, unworked material faster than falling in love with somebody and actually needing them. Right? Have you noticed we call our lovers baby? Why do we do that? At some level we know we're talking to the infantile part of them. Right? We say a wedding vow, till death do us part. Knowing consciously most people don't do that. Most people divorce. But if you suggest, well, let's do wedding vows, as long as we feel like it, people get enraged. People say, wait a minute, that's not a real commitment. I see a lot of, spiritual bypass happens. What can
Have you ever worked with the people instead of their girlfriends? And how does that go, if so?
I haven't worked directly with a person who's had that problem, but the person is struggling with anything. By the way, when you select spiritual practices, or whatever spiritual practices you have now, as you get familiar with what character structure patterns you do, just notice if there's a correlation. Is your favorite spiritual practice really just reinforcing your pattern?
Yeah.
I think we have a winner. People who do merging pattern and want to feel heart connected love bhakti yoga. Because the yoga is of feeling heart connected. They're already good at it.
Or they teach it.
Or they teach it. Exactly. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying notice, because frequently we will choose a practice that doesn't push us too far. If you do rigid pattern, maybe Zen practice is helpful because it's pretty rigid.
Become a healer if you want oral cop.
Yeah, right. Right, if I do oral comp and I want to heal everybody anyway, maybe I'll just become a healer. Now, there's a balance here between, are you using the gifts you have worked so long to hone? That can be great, that can be wonderful. And or how much of it is hiding out. We all get to hide out some places sometimes. I mean, let's not be strict with ourselves, right? Let's be kind. None of us are ready to just jump into whatever the full total nakedness of truth or whatever. We all need some protection. It's okay to have some. Just know what you're doing. That's all I'm suggesting. Because a lot of us will specialize in our particular spiritual practice and announce gleefully to those around us what a wonderful practice it is and how superior we are because we're doing that practice and how completely obviously inadequate they are, and reinforce our own defense strategies. Okay. One more, then we got to stop. Madam.
To the spiritual practice question.
Yes.
How do you know if you're doing it to reinforce your pattern or if you're doing it to reinforce your gifts?
Thanks, Cece.
You're welcome. I got you.
Oh.
I would propose your gifts don't really need reinforcement. That the part that you need to practice is something else. You've been practicing those gifts for a long time. They're already well developed or they wouldn't really be gifts. Consider changing to a practice that exercises a part of you that's not so well developed. And see what happens. See how it compares. Probably you'll feel more like a beginner and struggle more. It'll be more difficult. But I'm guessing you also will actually make more progress.
So there's more growth in that direction.
Yeah. Repracticing something you're already a champion at, you're not going to make that much improvement.
Okay.
And I don't want to make anybody wrong for doing that, Not everybody is on the steepest possible growth path in this lifetime. Some people, in the Michael teachings, there's a concept of arresting life. The person is just here taking a rest. It's like recess, right? And they get to do it. They get to focus on BMWs and hot tubs, and we don't have to judge them. And it's okay. Although some of us still will judge them.
Because that's our pattern.
That's our pattern. Yes, right. Okay.